Hi everyone, I hope everyone's good. So I've just been compelled to get a little something out there this week then, as we've seen the reopening of the schools and the reintroduction of children into the school environment. I'm hoping that this has brought about a lot of positivity for families at this time, and certainly I know the sense of structure and routine this may have brought will have been welcomed by many. However, obviously with the reopening of the schools, we have also seen this stepping up and pushing out of set measures in regards to the face masks and the testing of children in the schools. And firstly, I just want to point out how refreshing it's been for me to see so many parents and carers and school staff at this time who are in fact stepping up against these measures, who are rightfully recognising their right and ability to say no and to actually question the measures themselves. And I do find it encouraging to know that much more people are now actually raising questions about just how proportionate these measures are in relation to the risk posed by a virus itself, and questioning actually how harmful these measures are upon our children's emotional and mental health. And this is in no way me disputing the care or the love or the ability of the parents and carers who are otherwise perhaps accepting of the measures, who are enforcing them and imposing them. However, I do feel that there is a general lack of awareness of just how harmful these measures are. And I do think this largely equates to the fact that for the past 12 months, the general public has been presented with a very narrow and a very specific scope of information. And this information has been very much based on the emotions of fear and anxiety and dread and a sense of threat in relation to a physical health condition. And perhaps take us back a year, I do feel that maybe such drastic measures, such restrictive measures being rolled out by the government, in response to, in immediate and reactive response to a pandemic, to a crisis, maybe in some way they were understandable at the beginning, perhaps even justified to some extent. However, we are now 12 months down the line, and for me, it's absolutely outrageous, the position that we're in now. Certainly in relation to the fact that there is yet to be any sort of regard for the consequences, the harmful consequences of these measures themselves, of the restrictions themselves, which of course have already transpired in many ways. The fact that these measures are still ongoing, and the fact that they do not actually take into consideration everything that incorporates well-being. They completely disregard emotional health, mental health, other aspects of physical health, nutrition, socialization, even economic health. The measures are very narrow focused, and I'm sure most people listening to this will be able to identify how either themselves or their children or somebody close to them has suffered as a direct result of these measures themselves. Many more, I feel, than will be able to identify have fallen seriously ill, or perhaps losing somebody due to the virus itself. And that for me speaks volumes. So with the focus on children then, I come from a background of child development, childhood trauma, and child psychology. So straight from the beginning of this, my alarm bells were ringing, and I've been talking for a long time about this. And unfortunately, much of what I was able to foresee 12 months ago has already transpired in relation to the harmful effects these measures have upon our children, and have had upon our children. So there has been a rise in self-harm of children across a wide range of ages. There's been a rise in child suicide. There's been a rise in self-destructive behaviours, involvement in substance misuse, exploitation, gang involvement, etc. There's been a rise in nervous and anxiety disorders in children. There's been a rise in depression, in eating disorders. And actually there's been a rise in a lot of emotional and psychological conditions in children that in fact are only usually seen in a minority of extreme trauma cases. And these have been as a direct result of the measures themselves. Ofsted brought out a series of reports back in December, I believe, which recapped and looked at the effects that the stunt in education the previous time had upon children. And their reports shown a regression in social skills across all ages, a regression in communication skills, particularly and interestingly of the phonetic skills of children, which is actually the pronunciation of words, which I found quite interesting considering the mass wearing of facial coverings. There was effects upon literacy, on all academic levels, to be fair, but actually the main effects that were seen in children, it was their general mental health and their ability and ease in their communication and socialization. We have already seen as well, worryingly, how these fear-based ideas have become very much embedded in our children's psyches as normal. And what I'm talking about here is these ideas of avoidance of physical contact with others, the fear of being in close proximity with other people, the ideas of social distancing and isolation, these very immediate ideas of a threat to their health and to other people's health, of the risk of illness, the risk of death. Children have already become very accustomed to seeing their caregivers and concerningly themselves, in some cases, wearing masks when they go out of the house. Children have become accustomed to viewing others in social situations with their faces covered up. On a subconscious level, I believe our children are facing quite distorted ideas about identity, about individuality, and actually the ability to express. And also, our children, the ideas they're taking on at the minute in terms of their health and the ability of their bodies and their immunity, they're taking on an idea of their health being very fragile and very vulnerable, and actually their immunity being largely ineffective without quite unnatural and avoidant behaviours. I've spoke in depth before about the concept of belief systems and core beliefs which are formed in childhood. And the main point I just want to bring now is the fact that this isn't temporary for children. I do believe that many people have been quite accepting and compliant with set measures because they have been able to view and rationalise a temporary understanding of them. But for our children, these past 12 months will absolutely make a lasting impact upon their psychological health as as they continue throughout childhood, but actually throughout adulthood as well. The ideas that are formed in childhood are in a large part permanent, and they actually form everything a child comes to know about themselves, about other people, and about the world around them. So again, it is so vital that we are considering the lessons and the understanding that our children have taken on over this past year, which is a hell of a long time in a child's life, but are continuing to do so. The longer this goes on for, the more embedded these very distorted and harmful ideas will become in our children's minds. Therefore, for me, it is unacceptable to continue to view this as temporary sort of collateral damage, where our children are concerned, because this is absolutely having long-standing effects upon our kids, and quite worrying effects, some of which, and most of which actually, that we're yet to see in years to come. And I do think as well, this whole argument I've seen quite a lot coming out about, oh, well, our kids are resilient, kids by their very nature are resilient, and, our grandparents back in the war, they had to go through this, that and the other through their childhood, our kids will be fine. That, honestly, that is the most amount of nonsense I've ever heard in my life. And if you are coming from that sort of perspective, that is you clearly don't have an in-depth understanding about children's psychology and just how fragile our children's minds are. Our children are resilient in large part because what they go through in childhood, they actually lack the ability to rationalise and to actually question and to, in large part, change. So I do believe this is where this view's come from, because many children at this time, they probably seem okay. They probably seem to just be getting on with it and taking it on the chin and that. But actually, children by their nature internalise trauma, and it is their subconscious minds that we need to be very concerned about at this time. From my understanding, right now we are at a point of crisis intervention in terms of our children's psychological and emotional health. Their minds lie in a very fragile place right now, and actually, as a society, recovery-focused action needs to occur now in order to prevent any further damage taking place. What our children need at this time more than anything is nurture and a sense of positivity and empowerment and reassurance and fun and contact and socialisation, re-establish these very natural and positive aspects of life itself and of human behaviour. However, let's look at what's happening here. Look at what's being pushed out and pushed upon our children. Masks in the classroom, testing in their learning environments. Their teachers wearing masks when they're teaching them. Very, very concerning indeed. And actually, what concerns me is the fact that our children are being taught and our parents are being taught, this is what you need to do. Don't ask any questions. This is what's happening. Like it or not, follow this. That is concerning in itself. Certainly, and I will just bring a brief point to this. If you are of the argument, perhaps, that, oh, this is because of the virus, and, would you rather their physical health's at risk, etc. Look at the risk that is posed to our children. The risk of our children firstly contracting this virus is extremely minimal. The risk of them becoming seriously ill, and certainly the mortality rate in childhood in terms of this virus is very, very minimal. The risk is minimal, and it is certainly disproportionate to the measures being pushed out. On top of that, This is actually detailed in the document that come out by Public Health England in relation to these measures. They actually detail that the risk posed to school workers, school employees, is no different to any other sector. Any other employees in any other sector. So again, there's no validation here. There's no logic behind it. And actually, just to finish off, just in conclusion, it is important for me to point out actually how much our children's rights are being violated here. I'm not going to start feeding into our human rights as adults. That's for everybody to consider themselves. But actually, our children's rights are being violated. Our children have human rights that are protected through a range of legislation in the UK, such as the Children's Act, the Equality Act, the Safeguarding Act. There are many pieces of legislation which recognise the vulnerability of our children and the need to protect them and nurture their development on all levels. Internationally, there exists the UNCRC. This is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and this is human rights treaty for children, and they dictate that governments are obliged to prioritise the needs of children, the best interests of the child in any action, any decision taken that affects children. Well, there's a violation in itself. That is not happening, quite clearly not happening. Our government is full of health professionals, mental health professionals. They have an understanding of child development and just how harmful this is on all levels of mental health, and yet they're still pushing out these very harmful measures. Our children also have a right, just to touch upon, they have a right of association. They have a right to meet with other children, to be part of groups, to be active parts of community. They have a right to play. They have a right to relax. They have a right to take part in a range of activities in their communities. Children also have a right to have an education on health and well-being, and actually on human rights. Their education must develop, this is by right, by law, their education must develop their personality, their individuality, their talents, and their human rights. Again, we need to be looking at these rights that they have on an international level in comparison to what's actually happening and the lessons our children are being taught within the environments. I do get up to this point how many have struggled to believe that there is any ill intent as far as the government goes and as far as the information we're being presented with. But, I just basically urge you, now is the time to ask the questions. I'm not going to feed into any conspiracy theories here, any theories of why this is happening, why would our governments do this, etc. I'm not interested in talking about that. I just want to get out the fact out there that the actions being taken, the measures being pushed out are harmful. This isn't a case of opinion. This is evidence-based understanding, and you have a choice here, you have a voice, and you have the responsibility to stand up for the rights of your child, your children, and actually the more we do this together, the more we can begin to focus on recovery and reaching a more positive place on a societal level. But yeah, that's me. Thank you for listening. If there are any questions on what I've spoken about, please do not hesitate to contact me. If you have any concerns about your child's emotional or psychological health at this time, again, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm more than willing to guide and advise at this time as much as I can, based on my own understanding. So yeah, do contact me on the Children's Guard page on Facebook. Yeah, take care, everybody. Wishing you health and happiness. Thank you.